What is up, duelists? So I'm here with a little departure from our EDISON content. Some of you are going to love that. Some of you are going to hate that. And I want to take it back to 2005, 5 years prior to EDISON. This is a GOAT format. We've profiled a few times on this channel before. I'm sure that if you're watching this channel, you probably have some idea what GOAT format is. If not, definitely go check out goatformat.com. And unlike EDISON, there's a big rated section on Dueling Book that you can play this basically anytime you want. And there's big tournaments for it. And I just so happen to be quite good at GOAT format and did really well at a recent tournament. So I would like to profile the deck that I chose to play, which was a Chaos Control deck, basically meant to abuse this combo of meta and scapegoat to make Thousand Eyes Restrict and summon a lot of chaos monsters. But you guys already know that because you're very smart. And I just thought it would be kind of fun to go through the deck I played, which I did, put a decent amount of time and energy into working on. And maybe along the way, talk about some differences and similarities between this and the way I would approach deck building and playing this format versus EDISON. So I guess consider this a guide to GOAT format for maybe someone who's more into EDISON, as I am, honestly. I prefer EDISON. But let's get into it. So basically, over the past few months, and really year, like Warrior has gotten really, really popular. Anyone that's playing GOAT can tell you that. And I think the builds just got more refined. I was also playing Warrior for a while and enjoy that deck a lot. But I was playing Chaos Control a lot before that too, and I was finding the Warrior matchup to be really difficult. And nowadays that seems kind of funny because kind of common knowledge would dictate that Chaos Control is a pretty good Warrior matchup, being able to abuse kind of this like defensive core, and they can't really do much to 1,000 Eyes Restrict. You can go over the top of them pretty easily. It's not even getting into this stuff yet. But I was finding at the time the matchup would be pretty difficult, and that was kind of why I switched off. And I think a lot of people had that same opinion back then, that Chaos Control was kind of like seen as this more like skilled player's deck. It did really well at Worlds, and then there was just kind of this big backlash where everyone was trying to counter it, and that was why I built my Warrior deck, was mainly to counter Chaos Control about 8 months ago. So it's kind of interesting to see how the meta can cycle through these things, and that's pretty much true regardless of which format you're going to play. But here I am back on Chaos Control, and that's because, as I said, I think that you could construct it in a way to not get so hurt by Warriors, and at the same time still having pretty good matchup against what I consider the other most popular decks, Turbo, Warrior, and then you might have a slightly below that you have equally scary decks like Reasoning Gate, Panda Burn, which I was especially scared of because that normally has a pretty good matchup against Chaos Control decks or anything playing Scapegoat, really. Panda Burn's a really scary deck that has good matchups against a lot of decks, and I think more people need to be playing. It also has done really well in recent tournaments and on ladder, so I definitely knew that was something I had to be prepared for. So basically going in, that was kind of where my mindset was at. Like a lot of the more helmet players are just going to mainline Warrior, and Warrior's always a scary matchup because even if someone doesn't 1,000% know what they're doing, they could just open a good hand and kill you in like 3 turns. And in a different way, sort of similar with Panda, I mean, like, you have to build your deck to be prepared for some of the Panda, like Ojama locks, ways to break that and deal with all their traps, or else like even someone who's not super experienced could steal some wins. So those 2 decks in particular, I knew I was wanting to be really prepared for, and I felt like preparing for Chaos and other mirrors was just a little bit less of a priority for me, just because I feel like I can handle those matchups pretty well. I think those matchups everyone is kind of a lot more experienced in because they've just been kind of dealt with and hashed out, and side deck techs are all explored. Everyone kind of knows what's going on in those matchups, and I think that I have a pretty good sense of the rhythm to like avoid mind controls and knocks and not get my sets really blown out and taken in any type of way. So I was pretty comfortable in not building my deck for the mirror, I guess, and gearing a little more towards Warrior and Panda with some hedges against these other decks as well. So we can just take it through. I mean, this BLS Chaos Sorcerer really needs no explanation. I will say that I drew BLS a lot this weekend. I think I counted, and it was like, there were a bunch of matches that I drew BLS every game, like pretty, like top 10 cards. And just like, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm usually that lucky. I feel like I'm kind of unlucky sometimes, but this was definitely one of those weekends that like things were just kind of clicking, and you could kind of feel the pulse drop in my opponents as soon as you just slam this down like early game. I was slamming it a lot early game too, just like banish a single face down, like deal with it, and yeah, it won me a lot of games. Breaker, there's some argument against Breaker, but I also feel like against these decks like Panda Burn, I mean, it's just a good card to have. Even against Reasoning Gate, like forcing their goats early or calls or like random other traps they might play can actually be pretty valuable. So, you know, I'm never really down on Breaker, and 1900 attacker swings over an opposing like Kaiku or something like that. Double Deco, this might be a slight departure because I feel like a lot of people play tomato packages, Mimic packages. Mimic is obviously a level 1 that you can use with meta, but just in practice, I just don't find this to come up that much. I don't really know how to say it. Like Deco being a much sort of more threatening turn 1 set, because if they just like set a back row pass and you flip the Deco, you can get in for a lot more damage, especially like say you're holding a knock or you see it off that the Deco draw. Then if they try to like set another monster next turn, then you knock it, and then they're down to 52. And whereas with Mimic, like you would have to commit another monster to the board or only do 200 damage. So I think like those things actually matter a lot just in sort of these like micro situations. And I like Mimic. I'm not mad at Mimic, but just like the ability to pressure and you know, the attack with a Blade Knight, you book, you can swing over with the Deco, a lot of little things like that. So I just find it to be more solid, and even summoning it when you just need to like clock for damage. 2 Kaiku. Kaiku's not necessarily a card that I love, although I would say it did perform pretty well this weekend. Just something to note is that I actually did not play against any Warrior until my very last round that I played, which was losers finals. I ended up getting 3rd overall the tournament, but yeah, the guy who actually went on to win was on Warrior, and I ended up losing him. So even though, you know, slight hedge against Warrior with the deck choice, you still lose. But this happens, and Kaiku is not, I would say, particularly great in the Warrior matchup. I often side him out, and we can get into the side deck in a moment. But he is great against Chaos, obviously, and good enough against Warrior, I would say. Good against Reasoning Gate, pretty bad against Panda. Bad against these like hyper aggro matchups, especially if they're playing stuff like SDM or Gorilla main deck. But to me, just as another dark and as like a normal summon alongside one of these guys, one of the flips, I mean, he's pretty ideal and just can really lock out games for Chaos. So I sort of like a mid-ground dark monster, it just seems like the best main deck choice to me. Don't really know. You could go up on the Decoy Cheese or something like this, but I like Kaiku. 2 is solid. The 3 Faith, that was something kind of new for me. I'm usually not as big a fan of 3 Faith, but with this many spells, I mean, some decks are getting away with 3 Faith with maybe like 13 or 12 spells. I'm thinking of like the Chaos Turbo list that Chris Perovic used with Upstart Goblins. And there's clearly just a lot more fodder for the Moth in this. But even that being said, I mean, I guess I drew double Moth a couple times early, and it kind of hurt me, especially post-board when they have more stuff to deal with it. But you got to kind of simplify your game plan, I think, in certain ways. And it's like, look, how are most games, especially at super high level, like when people are of equal skill in GOAT format 1, and a lot of times it comes down to who sees the pot Graceful Duo first or more, or can resolve them more, and abuse Magician of Faith and Sugiyami stuff too. And like, you know, call it what you want, but that really does decide a huge amount of games, just who hits this first and who can resolve this more. So I play the Third Faith. And like for a while, I think I kind of talked myself out of it. Like, no, it's not consistent. That's just a blowout win. It's win more. Like, you don't need to do it that way. But it's like the best card in the format. Like, I'm playing 3. Yeah. And it served me pretty well all day. Like I said, I hit my BLS. I hit my good stuff a lot. So can't be mad at it. I do definitely. I feel like I consider it a staple now in Turbo and in this. It's just like, why would I not? You know, it can be a free win in so many ways. Sangin. Sangin's great. Sinister, also really good with the metas. Yeah, nothing more to say. Triple Thunder Dragon. I actually did draw Double Thunder Dragon kind of a lot relative to the amount of rounds. I think I played 7 rounds total. I started 5-0, and then I lost in winners finals, and I lost in losers finals. So between those probably 16 or 17 games, I drew Double Thunder Dragon like 2 or 3 times, which is kind of a lot. But I did a kind of cool play. I guess I'll also mention a few of those as I go along in this. That I opened Double Thunder Dragon, and I didn't want him to know that, because, you know, sometimes when people know that you've drawn Double Thunder Dragon, they just play much more aggressive. I mean, they know you have 2 dead cards, so it can really affect the way they choose to play out their turn, like much more aggressive with a knock or something like that, to stop you from like getting a deco draw and drawing out of, you know, into a Graceful or something like that. So even if you didn't have a spell on Grave, if they knew you had Double Thunder Dragon, someone might be more likely to knock. Whereas if you just like set if you either just didn't discard them or do what I did, which I still didn't want to brick even harder on the next draw, you know what I mean? The 3rd Thunder Dragon, as unlikely as that is. We were already in the territory of drawing Double Thunder Dragon, so whatever. But so what I did was I discarded 1, and then I searched, the final one, and I like quickly ended my turn. I typed in the chat, I was like, oh crap, or something like, wow, oh wow. And the guy was like, what, you know, thinking that I had to like stop play or something. And I was like, oh no, I'm just stupid. Like, I can't believe I did that. Or like, I don't even remember what I said in chat. And at the end of the day, who knows if this actually like fooled this guy. And it's such a marginal advantage of having one, because you got to think about it too, that by the next turn, if I had truly forgotten to add or misclicked or something to add my my 2nd Thunder Dragon from the deck, which is sort of what I was bluffing, then I would just remember to do it the following turn. So as soon as I enter my main phase 1 the next turn, and I don't add that 3rd Thunder Dragon, he immediately is like, oh, this person is the stupidest, worst player alive, which hopefully he can tell I'm not. And or he was trying to trick me in a kind of really stupid way. But here's the thing, folks, is that I will take those stupid trick attempts every time. Costs me nothing to type a little funny phrase in the chat. You believe me, and it somehow alters your play. Amazing. I'll take that every time. You don't believe me, and you say, oh, this guy's trying to trick me. He drew Thunder Dragon, and it's just like trying to be an idiot and play it off like I won't notice. Then sure, you caught me, but you already knew that. You already knew I drew Double Thunder Dragon. So it's free. It's so free. And I do little things like this all the time. And call it whatever you want. But I think, to me, this is what impresses me when someone is able to pull off little tricks like this. Without further ado, Tribe. Tribe is actually weirdly really important. I kind of would cut Tribe from a lot of other decks. It kind of just seems to underperform. But this weekend, it was really good for me. And I played a lot of grindy Chaos Mirrors, and like having the blowout sit there for a while and then someone drive and kill is super good. Sook, only 1, drawing 2 is kind of rough, although I definitely could consider going up to 2, kind of for the same reasons I said on the Faith, and it's a great normal summon against Warrior opposing Haikus as well, or opposing TDR, I guess. So I definitely could consider going up to 2, but for now, I feel like the 1 is fine. It just like keeps your kind of flow of summons consistent without getting too bogged down. And that is the monster lineup. 18 was pretty good for me. The whole deck was honestly pretty good for me. The like I said, I drew pretty fortunately in a lot of games, and the games that I lost, it was one Chaos Mirror against Artsone, who he got second and just won the last GFC. So I guess he's a pretty good player. We were actually on kind of similar lists where he was playing Chaos Control with upstarts, but he had a little bit more of a turbo spin where he wasn't playing Decree, and he had like only 2 meta and double Night Assailant and card destruction. So just a little more like speed and power. And definitely has a favorable matchup against anything main decking Decree, because I don't think he was on that many traps either. But I lost to him, and honestly, game 1 I used this guy, which I guess we can get to the extra deck in a few minutes, but Dark Blade to banish all his lights and darks from the graveyard, and I knew he had a hand of mostly dead chaos monsters, and wouldn't you know it, his draw for turn was Graceful Charity, and I'm pretty sure aside from Pot into Graceful, any other card in his deck would have just lost him the game the following turn. But he drew Graceful, and he summoned his BLS and killed me. So these things happen, and in game 3 he Pot and double dash shooted me, so I lost. And I lost the Warrior guy. So, but those things, I don't know, like I would maybe side deck a little differently. I don't even know if I would change the cards, but I might change the way I side deck against the Warrior. But I feel like the deck performed well, and I honestly, maybe some side deck changes, but not really thinking of making any changes now. Anyway, back to spells. Double Book. This seems fine for me. You can cut to 1. Book's just a nice versatile card. I think kind of underrated even in Chaos matchups. I mean, against the meta, Metamorphosis, everyone knows it's good. But even against Turbo, it's like protecting your Sork. I mean, blocking their Breaker, blocking their Snatch. These things come up, and I've gotten to the point I was siding out all my books, and now usually I'll keep in 1, sometimes even 2. These guys, I actually side out Duo a lot. For a while, I thought this was the craziest thing to do. I thought no one should do this. It's just such a power card. Back to the Faith and Trinity thing. But when you're going second against, especially against that like Turbo Night Assailant, TD Night Assailant stuff, or against Warrior, I really don't like it. I keep it a lot in going first, and it's just, better value there obviously. But definitely should experiment with siding this out. I know Delinquent did pretty well recently and did not even main or side it. A couple people have been doing this to pretty great success. Storm, sit on goats, wait for Storm, OTK them, great. Triple meta, sometimes Druid Dead, power card, don't think I'd go less than 3. It's too good. Maybe 2. I've tried 2 in other decks before, but I liked it. And definitely what I want to say with meta 2 is I really touched... let's see, I did Thousand Eyes, obviously a ton, and I made Senshi a handful of times. There was a point where I almost made Ojama King. I think I made the level 4s like once, level 4, level 3. Dark Blade I definitely made, Baltar I definitely made. So I think that's just sort of and Gatling I made a number of times. I had a really crazy match where I OTK'd, or not OTK'd, but like made a huge push in one turn, really late game with like 1 card left in my deck. And I used Gatling Dragon to do this. But I think that just speaks to the power of meta and like why I actually think this deck is still a pretty strong contender, like despite the brick hands, despite whatever. It's like you just have access to all this sort of like powerful toolbox, and really like I keep saying, like every time I made one of these things, it like won me the game. I made Reaper on the Nightmare twice, one against a Panda Burn deck that I did play, and I was very thankful to have the deck that I did and the matchup experience thanks to a friend that I tested with, Pui. Shout out to you. But yeah, I really felt like I knew how to play the matchup, and despite their deck being a little different than what I had tested against, they were using things like Messenger of Peace that my Decree doesn't do much to, and that was giving me a little bit of trouble. It was just stalling out the game. I didn't want them to draw into their combos, so at some point I just made a Reaper on the Nightmare after clearing their board and just started poking, and it got I think 1 discard, then they just set their hand. But what's more important is it was just a clock, and the next turn I think I drew a Sangan and summoned it, and it went from like a game where they were at like 5,000 life points and stalling with messenger, and what's that, a 50 turn clock that I would have to sit there, and then between Reaper and Sangan they're dead in like 3 turns. So I really was happy with that choice. I also made it in a scenario where both of us were basically goat locked, or actually I was goat locked and I think they had 1 slot open, but I made it, and because I had a really strong hand of like Tribe, BLS, Sork, I don't remember if I had Storm or not, but and I was basically just sitting there waiting, and I was like, yeah, as soon as this guy deals with my can take a monster off the field, then I'll be able to just kill him in 1 shot basically. So I made Reaper on the Nightmare, knowing that it would basically force him to do something at least. Like, I think what he ended up doing was hitting with a Kaiku, which is a pretty good answer, but then I was just able to switch my Reaper to defense. And yeah, I mean, otherwise I was going to poke him for 800 a turn, discard his whole hand, which clearly he didn't want. He was sitting on a hand similar to mine of like chaos monsters and setup, so he can't have that happen. And even though he attacked with Reaper, I just switched my Reaper, attacked with Kaiku, I just switched my Reaper to defense. He was forced, or maybe not forced, but he decided it was a good idea to 1,000 Eyes Restricted the following turn, and that opened up the slot, and that's when I was able to just go Tribe, kill both his Kaiku and his 1,000 Eyes, puts my Dark back in grave, and then I just OTK'd him that turn. So I think both those scenarios that I made it were pretty heads up plays, if I do say so myself, and even the Dark Blade, even though that didn't work out so well because he drew Graceful, that was still the right play, and it would have won me the game. And same for all these. I mean, they just all came up really clutch, and definitely don't realize that these are options, like in these games. I mean, it's pretty rare, I think, that it's like a great play to turbo into one of these guys. You really have to know the game state and understand when you're doing it and why and what you're cutting off. But hey, when it's the right play, it's the right play, and I think that's something that more people just got to realize. It just felt sort of like I was like playing the deck to its potential because I know the right spots to use these things. This is getting a little long, so let's wrap it up here. Let's MST double knock. Some people don't main the knock. I played like all chaos, so I'm glad I made the knock. Also against the burn decks and stuff too. You really need to answer the Cyberjar. Double goats, not 3. Bad against burn. Just bricks with 3 in general. There's not really any matchup I want 3. Even warrior, not a fan. Snatch, broken. Double upstart. I guess this does warrant some explanation. It's good with the faiths, and like I said, I drew BLS and all these like Storm Tribe combos a lot this weekend, and even though that statistics is very minimal, how much upstart actually changes. I mean, to me, I certainly noticed that I drew these cards more, and I can only attribute that to upstart. I think tying it back to Edison, Chris, who won Topher, who won the Edison Legends tournament with Blackwing with double upstart, he said something like, yeah, everyone's complaining I do Dark Arm so much, but it's like I play Allure, double upstart, and more deck thinning and stuff. So that's kind of how I felt. It's like, yeah, I drew BLS a lot, but like if I'm playing 38 cards and you're playing 40, I'm going to draw BLS more than you. Facts. And same if I'm playing Dekoichi versus something like a Mystic Tomato that needs to trigger to thin the deck. I have this kind of like small draw engine as well. And then now we get to kind of the more juicy part of the deck, Decree. And I want to give a quick shout out to, sorry, actually not Don't Copy. I mean, shout out to Don't Copy, you're a nice guy. But this is a Geist D's deck, who I speak to on occasion. I think he's a great player, and I think also has his Worlds invite, so definitely someone to watch out for that. But he had this list, which then Don't Copy ironically copied for his second place finish recently. This was a Patreon tournament, I think GoFormat.com held. And it was, as you can see, it's a pretty similar core. Double Decree, same trap lineup, double upstart, and he had 3 Kaiku and Injection instead of the 2 Decos. But, Book and Premat were different too. But yeah, I mean, aside from those differences, like the overall strategy of Decree CC is, I definitely took a lot of inspiration from him. I had played around with it before, like a lot of people had, but those deck lists were, and with upstarts, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Yeah, it really just counters those burn decks. It gives you a better matchup against the warrior deck. I mean, what would you have in these spots? Like, some people do 2 Regeki breaks. Some people do like 1 Regeki break, 1 Sakuretsu armor. There are all these things that you could do, but I just feel like I'll take the blowout against the matchups that I'm actually worried about and I expected to be pretty prevalent, because Decree is also not bad against the Chaos Mirror, depending on how many traps they're on and how exactly you both draw. But like, it can definitely be just as good as something like a Regeki break. And so let us get into side decking real quick. I can actually just show you how I side for these matchups. I think that's pretty helpful. And also, if you have no clue what I'm doing right now, you really should take a few minutes before you maybe enter a big tournament, if you know you're playing an important match, and think about how you're going to side against the various decks that you're going to play. Here is how I side against the Panda Burn deck. I keep talking about this deck, but I just really think it's a super strong deck, and I think that everyone should be prepared for it. But you definitely don't want to leave in the Scapegoats, even though they combo with your meta. I think meta is actually still good enough, like I said, to make these like Senshi or these other toolbox guys. But I board out the Kaiku, and then usually for the last slot, I will do the Tsukiyomi. It depends, because it can give you a little fewer outs to your Thousand Eyes. Going second, if they like to set their whole hand, I might do Duo, or you can do 1 Faith as well. But that's more or less how I'd side against the Panda deck. You could also just take out this Regeki break. Against the guy I played, I needed it for the Messenger outs. Against Warrior, this is pretty much what I was doing, keeping the goats in, obviously. And I was boarding in the 3rd Decree, which kind of bit me in the last game I played, because I drew Decree and a ring, and I was kind of forced to use the Decree early, and then I just got beat down. So Decree is definitely a somewhat volatile card in that matchup, but I still think, end phase Decree, especially if you're going first. Going second, I might only go down to 2, but it's still really good. So then you have something like this. Jinzo is just a cool card. It actually, I'm always a little bit conflicted on whether I really like it against Warrior, but it has that same kind of auto-win potential, and it's a dark body, so it kind of is different from this. But it's certainly good against the burn deck, 100%. And then against the Chaos Mirror, as you can see, I've been boarding these Kaikus out, but that's definitely where the Kaiku wants to stay in. I'll usually keep Duo in as well. If they're on Turbo, I definitely keep the Mind Controls. If they're on more Chaos Control deck with the metas, then I don't really like Mind Control against this deck, unless they're playing some crazy flip packages with like Deco or Magical Merchant, perhaps. I board out the Decrees in most of these Chaos matchups, unless they're playing crazy builds with like Solemn and Jars of Greed. But I usually just do the Decrees for the Regeki breaks, and then like in the mirror, I would just do something like this, and against Turbo, I would keep the Kaiku, and I would put in like the 2 Mind Controls, sometimes just 1 for usually like Book. Sometimes I would take out Mirror Force. Sometimes I would only put 1 Regeki break. Sometimes I got MST. So all this kind of stuff. Sometimes I got 1 Magician of Faith. And I guess I can do a Reasoning Gate too, although it's kind of a freebie. I usually don't have too much trouble against that deck unless they get super lucky. Regeki break you don't usually need 2 of, but yeah, so I think I usually just do something like this. Yeah, this seems right. You can like take out the upstarts if you really wanted, and the Regeki break is pretty good, I guess. So do with that what you will. But I guess that's basically it. I had a great time playing this tournament. This is actually the first GOAT format tournament I've done well at all. I usually just seem to do really bad for whatever reason. I do pretty well on the GOAT ladder, but I don't know, just in tournament, deck kind of craps out on me, or I get kind of unlucky. But thank you guys. And I know this was, as I said, a departure from the Edison content, but I figure you goat heads could use a little love as well. I know there's a lot of crossover between those communities. And if you're not familiar with Edison and you're just watching this because you love goat format so much and you love James Arc and my new account too, then I would say check out Edison. Check out some of the other videos on this channel. You might really like it. It's a 2010 like 5Ds era format that has synchros, but not in a super overpowered way, I guess. And I would say a lot of other people much prefer it to GOAT format as far as like a skillful, diverse, and fun time, because I think we can all agree GOAT can be a real pain sometimes. But I will see you all at Worlds. This is my second invite because I got top 4 on the ladder before as well. And that will apparently earn me some kind of higher seed point. So I get to play against someone easy or get a bye round 1. So tune into that in October, and there's a few more ways to qualify, so check out goformat.com if you're curious about all of that. And thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy my Decree CC deck.